Joining me right now is Ed Kim, Education Development and Curriculum for C2 Education. That's the nation's premier test prep and college counseling organization. Hey, Ed, first of all, thanks for being here. I got a question for you. So Ed, what is the relevance now today of like SAT scores, ACT tests? You know, that first step that used to be the real big difference between whether you went through life with a coat and tie or a name tag. I mean, how important is it to take these tests, and how does it influence a school's decision whether or not to accept you?
It's still very much important. Things like the SAT and ACT test scores and anything that has to do with the college admissions process, for the most competitive students or students that want to go to a top-tier school, it's one of the first things that college admissions will look for on top of GPA, course rigor, things like that. So anything that has to do with academic achievement, even though some may argue that these test scores are not the best indicators for college success, it's still an academic measure in which college admissions will use to gauge differences between the thousands of applications they get every year.
It always seemed to me, though, that those scores and those tests told you how well a person takes a test. And how relevant is that in any particular job? I mean, is it a pressure thing? Is it the ability to perform under pressure, the ability to remember and then apply that memory? I mean, what really do we find out about a person that does well on an SAT or any of these prep score tests?
Right. So I think to your point, and part of that is true, where it does test the student's ability to, take a certain test, right? And it's not like in our adult career jobs, we take that many tests unless we're certifying for some kind of, degree or qualification. But ultimately, there are some learning skills and academic skills that do apply in adult life, such as the ability to take some kind of content and be able to dissect it, to understand it, analyze it, apply it critical thinking-wise, analytically towards other questions. It's not like as adults we'll get a test with 50, 60 questions on it for a section on reading or writing. But things like the writing section, it does test how well a student's grammar mastery is, how much knowledge of the English language they have. And that is important when you're thinking about writing skills or about reading skills in general. Reading passages do test the student's ability to take any kind of passage and understand what the author is trying to drive at. So that is important for things in college where you read hundreds of pages for some majors just to prepare for class so you can dissect the information more effectively.
Not to politicize it, but it seems to me, at least in the last couple of years, that intelligence and education has taken a backseat to intuition, back of my neck sort of knowledge, and that, that science and these other skills, as important as obviously they are, I mean, that's how we all got here. It seems like they've diminished a bit in popular culture. Is populism an enemy to this kind of testing? And the second part of that question is, maybe there is some truth to the fact not everybody should take these tests. Maybe not everybody should go to college.
Right. So, as both a professional educator and my personal opinion, I would say that, populism, I wouldn't say is so much an enemy, but it's a factor that detracts away from how important education is. And you are correct. Like in recent years, in the last 10 to 12 years, education has become less of a hot topic and a forefront issue for not just politics, but for, our way of life and things like that. But the crazy thing is parents face that concern every single day. A lot of families still move to different areas based on how strong a school is. So I think there's an ebb and flow to how important education becomes in the country. And I think we're in, a more downhill part of where education stands. Teacher training resources, the quality of teachers, even test prep companies like C2, we see these, ups and downs in the industry all the time.
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of young people obviously are trying to figure out, what the world's going to look like in 15 years. And I mean, 20 years ago, we had no idea what it looked like today, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to tell. And I don't know if that accelerated growth, if what kind of education is the best to match with that. I mean, should we all become coders or content providers? Do we, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you know? Do these tests really adequately look into the mind of our society, down the road? I mean, are the tests forward-thinking?
The tests, to say that they're forward-thinking is kind of tough to say, but what we do acknowledge is that the tests are just one of many steps for the traditional pathway where if your student's looking at some kind of career along the standard paths of life, like engineer, lawyer, medicine, a lot of the, tiger parenting type pathways, it's a necessary step, I still believe. It's the ability for a student to take certain tests under pressure to analyze them, to be able to think critically through different things under certain time periods is important. But it's not for everybody. I would agree that sometimes, some students are better fit for certain vocations, going to technical skills, coding, let's say. I was just advising a student a few weeks ago that wanted to take over his family's chicken farming business, which is successful in Georgia. And that person does not necessarily need to go to school. So my advice for students and parents is to think about what kind of life and career the student wants to pursue. So a lot of C2 students, they want to pursue the traditional pathways and careers that they're, with titans of industry with in terms of engineering, medicine, law, business. So it does depend on what the student wants.
Talking to Ed Kim, he's from C2 Education Development and Curriculum for them. It's the nation's premier test prep and college counseling organization. All right. So I think if you were going to give advice, if we were going to try to give a kind of a BuzzFeed list, and obviously the thing is learn as much of as many different things as you possibly can. But what about the philosophy of learning? Has that changed? I mean, in other words, when I was younger, I had a mom who was, kind of self-taught and, went on to college by herself and still does it today. She's 96. But I was little. She used to tell me things like, always turn around and face the things that are bothering you. Always push through and never give up. Always, I think the best thing is that find out what you're really interested in and what you're really good at and gravitate toward that. Is there any test for that sort of stuff?
See, and I think that's a issue with our country. We don't have any well-developed tests for that. I don't think I know of any tests that really look into what we can do to match a student to what their passions are. Our advice to parents is to expose their kids to as many opportunities as possible in different walks of life and different activities, just so that kids can try to discover that, that ignite their passion for a certain thing. And that philosophy still applies. We tell our students, look, you have to find what you're good at, what you love, what's going to drive you, and keep pushing leadership, keep pushing activity, engagement in that direction. Trying to force a student who loves history to go into math is just insane. It just doesn't match with the student. It's setting them up for failure.
Well, so and it's I tell. First joke I ever did, and I did stand-up for a long time. The first joke was I went to college and majored in philosophy. I graduated, got a job with a philosophy company. And people laugh because they never look at liberal arts as the kind of thing that's going to employ you. But I think today,
right.
I really think today that a liberal arts degree is different than it was 30 years ago. And I really think that that's the kind of thing that as we move forward, we'll find out just how things have changed. I know that, what's currently going on in Washington right now and that back to populism and all that shouldn't discourage people from learning smart stuff. Ed, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Chip. Appreciate it.
That's Ed Kim from C2 Education, the nation's premier test prep and college counseling organization.